I am very excited for this episode because it was 3 years ago that we bought our 1940s military trailers and put out 2 episodes on them. But to rewind even further, we first laid eyes on an off-roading trailer while totally in its element on the Rubicon Trail and were instantly hooked.
That's exactly what I want to build.
Yes, we do comment on our own videos. Fast forward a few months, and we found 3 for sale in Utah from an older gentleman looking to wind down his assets. These were total barn finds, and we made him an offer for all 3 of them for $5,000. We first drove across state lines to fit as many as we could of them into the bed of my pickup. They were in very good condition for their age, and after trying to make out the serial numbers, we determined the gray one was a Bantam T3-C from 1946. The jury is still out on the red one, which was heavier gauge but similar dimensions. I wanted to experience the trailer as is before going all out with the modifications, so we limited our work that summer to applying new paint to both trailers, wiring new lights, and Conrad did switch his axle and hubs to allow for the same bolt pattern as his tow vehicle. I sewed a simple canvas cover to keep the loose cargo from flying out of the trailer, and I think it gave the trailer a pretty cool look. Then, and I can't believe I did this, I spent a total of 4 months sleeping in this trailer and next to the trailer, almost fully exposed to the elements as we made our overlanding videos over the last couple years. But it turns out this duck fabric, which I sewed with, which was billed as being water resistant, does a great job of sagging and funneling all of the rainwater directly through your sleeping bag during winter nights. And put another way, the longer you overland and brave the elements, the more your imagination runs wild about the possibilities for more comfort. As I look back on my original vision that I laid out in that first video, mine for instance, and I think for Conrad's too, we're gonna get an RV water tank, 12-volt pump in there, and then I've already ordered some lithium-ion batteries to make a little bank in there. They're super lightweight. It's gonna have 280 amp hours of capacity, and it can power like an overhead light as well. I might even do a sink, I might even do a faucet, certainly a stove, probably a 12-volt fridge. So we're gonna jam pack these things. It is still my exact vision. The basic systems will include a rooftop tent, a water tank with 12-volt pump, a sink and stove, a fridge, a battery, and fuel storage. But given how little space we have to work with, it's absolutely essential that every detail is thoroughly considered. Thankfully, I have a tendency to obsess about my projects, so for the hundreds of hours that this build-out will take over the next few months, there are hundreds more spent researching and obsessing over details late at night. Let's discuss the design tenets I'm following. I want simplicity, ease of access, low weight, and dual purpose. If I was taking inspiration from a Pinterest board, it would be filled with fire stations with their openness and simplicity, and data centers with their density and practicality. I don't want to waterproof the whole trailer because that adds weight and hurts accessibility, so I want to make each component waterproof. I also don't want components hanging off the sides which can get banged up on rocks, become a theft target, and alter the aesthetic of the trailer. I want the rooftop tent to raise to a height that allows sitting underneath it and lower down enough to keep the weight low and act as a security cover. Put another way, while not at camp, it needs to be low enough that the fridge, jerry cans, and other items can't be lifted out of the trailer. The countertop needs to be as large as possible, and by getting a water tank with a height just below the surface of the trailer, the countertop can extend over the top of the tank to block UV light from degrading the medium density polyethylene and encouraging algae growth, and I get more counter space. Items that don't need to be frequently accessed, such as the diesel heater, water pump, and propane tank, will be tucked underneath the counter. I'm starting the design in the free online version of SketchUp, and I've measured the trailer with a tape measure, then created this basic tub to work within. I can then play around with each component I want to add in. I already own the Iceco fridge, so I just go to the Amazon detail page to find the dimensions. So I see the product dimensions here, and these look a little weird to me. I don't think 27.4 inches is the actual height, so I'm gonna come over to the product images, and I see it drawn directly here on the image, which is pretty trustworthy, so 19.2 inches high, 15.8 inches deep, and 27.4 inches wide. If I had any further doubts, I could look at the product reviews, and sometimes people will correct the dimensions there. And let's come over to SketchUp to draw this out. So we're gonna start with the line function here, and I'm no expert. I have to look at a tutorial almost every time I do this. So I'm gonna click and let go. Now just drag the mouse up this way. It knows which axis to follow. So I'm just gonna type in, it's the unit right now is inches, so 27.4 wide, enter. Now again, without clicking or anything, I'm just continuing to move the cursor. I'm gonna move it along this axis here, which is the depth of 15.8. Type that in, hit enter. Still without clicking, come back down this way, 27.4. And now I can go ahead and click at the endpoint there. I'm gonna hit space, which just selects this right here. Oh, you know what? I missed that somehow. So let's click the line here again, click, click, okay, space. Now, let's do this push-pull function. So click that, click, drag the cursor up, again without clicking, 19.2, enter, and space. Now I'm gonna highlight it, that's the fridge. I'm gonna right click, make component. I'll call it VL45. Create. And then let's make that a different color. So I think it's materials. Let's make it this green color here. Boom. And hit space again. And now I'm gonna hit M, which is this function right here to move. And we're gonna place it into the trailer. So we're gonna start there. And you can see from this angle, it's pretty clear it's too far forward. So I'm gonna drag that back a little ways. I know that this right here is 18 inches, so it'll extend beyond by 1.2 inches, which is totally fine. And you know what we could do actually, because I know that, we can take the measuring tape here and click, and then up here, so that's 3 1/8 inches. So I know then that we can lower this by quite a bit. So let's grab that. Okay, there we go, perfect. All right, you can even see the outline at the bottom, perfect. So we'll put it like that. So the fridge is still too far forward, so let's just click that. Let's drag that back just a hair. And that looks pretty good. You know what, it's a little too close to that side wall, so I'm gonna hit M. Let's move it off just a tad. Perfect. Now we can zoom in if we want and can measure between those two just to make sure there's a little bit of a standoff for the ventilation. So that's 7 1/8 of an inch, that's plenty. So there we go, that's our fridge. Let's do the same now with the water tank. I'm on the detail page and I'm seeing it's 34.5 long by 17.5 wide by 12 high. So these are fairly interchangeable because you can see there are ports on many sides of the tank. Let's go ahead and draw this. Let's select our line here and let's do 12 inches in this direction. Let's do 34.5, go another 12 that direction and complete that. Come here to push pull, click, drag it up, and that will be 17.5. We'll highlight that, make that a component, call it water tank 2. And I think I'm cool with that. Well, let's actually make that blue. Let's go here and make that light blue. And let's drag it in. And I want a little bit of space here because the fridge controls are on this side, and I know I have to access them physically. And this is also where I want to put the water heater because it can't go underneath the countertop. So everything from this point, this line backward, will be covered by counter. So anything that burns and needs to vent to the open, which is just the water heater. The diesel heater is self-contained, so that can go back here, but the water heater needs some space. So we'll put this sort of as close to the fridge as we can. We don't want to go too far back, otherwise the weight fully loaded. So a gallon of water is 8 pounds. This is a 30-gallon tank. That's 240 pounds of water plus maybe 10 for the tank. So that's 250 pounds. It's very important that that stays pretty centered and as close to the axle as possible so that when it's fully loaded, we're not tipping the tongue weight too light and creating some handling issues. So that looks about right there. We can see that it needs to be centered a little bit more here, and that's plenty of room for the fittings. So that is the water tank, and I've already drawn some other components here. So we have the jerry cans. Drag them up to the front here. Whoops. Hit M, click that, okay. Cool. Zoom in here and try to fix these up a bit. Cool. So plenty of room there, enough room for the fridge to have a little bit of space, enough for the jerry cans to have their mounts in here, and there's a little bit of room left over. And in fact, we do need some room on multiple sides for the standing desk legs for the rooftop tent. So we're actually gonna wanna leave more space on the side of the fridge here. We're gonna drag that over, and at some point I'll measure the standing desk legs and make sure I've left enough here, but that should be sufficient. Let's grab the propane tank, something like that. Grab the stove, that's gonna be surface mounted, pretty much right here, more or less. And then we'll grab the sink and the faucet. That is the best drawing I could do. That thing sticking up there is the faucet. So let's get that flush. Now, give a little room off the back. And same with this thing. Bring the stove away from that edge there because it is gonna have some fittings that drop down. So that's kind of coming together right there. Those are the main components. And you can see everything is pretty flush. The fridge goes up just slightly, but that's okay because it's still well below the rooftop tent. And everything that is gonna be mounted to the surface of the counter or the water tank, which is mounted below, still leaves plenty of room. And we can zoom in here and take a close look at what we're doing. So now, and I've already drawn this, let's grab that rooftop tent and let's bring it over here. So I want this to be positioned, start there, like this. I want that to be positioned pretty far forward for weight reasons. And because I don't want it to interfere with my cooking in the kitchen. So, all right, so that's about flush with the front. We're pretty much there. That's looking pretty good. Let's check this out. Jerry cans do stick up a little bit. Makes sense. They're slightly taller than the trailer's height. Oh, look at that sink. So there's an issue right there. So that sink is too far to the edge. So we're gonna need to drag this closer to the middle. Right there, you can kind of see there's a little bit of a gap. We'll do that right there. Perfect, much better. Now there's room here for the plumbing to come through. Once you actually do this, you realize you learn a lot of design mistakes. Obviously, if we had cut the countertop before figuring that out, we could have cut it far too close to the edge, and that would have created certain issues. And then same thing with the stove. The stove does have some fittings that drop down, and also for safety reasons, you don't want the stove to be too close to the edge. You'll knock pots over, and that can be pretty dangerous. So I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. All of the heavier stuff is either centered over the axle, or the things with variable weight, like these fuel tanks can be completely empty, same with the fridge, or they can be completely loaded down. Those are pretty far away from the axle, and so if I do have that variability, I want that to be on the forward side of the axle, not the rear side. So the rear side is really consistent items. It's the sink, which is obviously, empty while driving. Propane tanks aren't very heavy, and the stove here, and then a couple of minor components underneath here, the diesel heater, etc. Light stuff, essentially. All right, let's order some parts and get started. All right, the 30-gallon water tank just showed up, and this thing is honestly smaller looking than I expected it to be. So I'm gonna put the fittings on that side, and probably have it like this. That looks a little better. beautiful. That fits exactly as I expected. And this guy slots in right like that. Boom. The 30-gallon water tank just came in, and I'm super happy with how it's looking. It fits exactly as I estimated because the listing was just spot on Amazon. So it's exactly 12 inches wide and 17.5 inches tall, which falls just below this 18-inch lip. Uses all the vertical space, which is really efficient. For 30 gallons, I'm amazed at how small this thing is. I just got 2 mechanisms for standing desks, and I'll tell you why. I've been thinking a lot about how to mount the rooftop tent onto the trailer here, and ideally it would be liftable and lowerable. The reason why, when I'm driving, I want a low center of gravity, both for tipping reasons and for wind resistance. I also want it low to prevent theft. So I think if the tent is low enough, it'll prevent the jerry cans from being lifted up out of there. That being said, when I park, I want it to raise up so that I can access my equipment in there. I can get the tent up out of the way. Ideally, it would provide some shade. And so I scoured the internet for like pre-existing lift solutions. Everything I found about lifting rooftop tents was really like, how do you store it in a garage? None of them that I found were how to lift them up and down on your rig. So I have a standing desk for my work, and I looked up the weight capacity on that. It was about 250 pounds. And so I have 2 of these, and they didn't come with the desk, which is nice, so I don't have to throw that away. So between these 2, they have 500 pounds of lifting capacity. The tent is only 130 pounds. And so I don't really have a great sense of the lowest setting and the highest setting on these when it's actually mounted in the trailer. You know, I could have gotten a little bit more into that, but I think roughly the rooftop tent will be about 1 foot from the top of the trailer while I'm driving in the lower position. And then when it's raised up, I think the rooftop tent will be roughly at eye level. So we're gonna open these up and just see what they look like and ultimately try to fab them into the 4 posts of the trailer. They each seem to be about 51 pounds with all the packaging, so I'm guessing something around 49 pounds without the packaging. I'm glad they feel super heavy, but I'm glad because I've been worried about how strong this equipment might be, the structure might be to support the 130-pound tent. So I'm gonna open these up and see what we have here. I can already tell there's going to be some interesting fabbing to do here. Just want to be very careful that I leave this in packable condition in case we have to abandon the plan. All right, this is the leg of one of them. So this is one of the 4 legs, one of the 4 motors. There are different types of standing desks to where you can get ones with only 1 motor. I got ones with dual motors, so just provides extra strength. So yeah, this thing is beefy. My only concern is finding a good way to secure the hinges onto this. Although it feels beefy, so yeah, there's some plastic components. I don't know, it's a total shot in the dark. Let's see how this goes. Okay. Yeah. That's about, no, less. Wow, it's not very much. That is travel of about 18 inches. So it's okay. I think that's good enough. All right, cool. I'm unclear whether I put this on the inside or the outside. The problem with the outside is it'll be less water protected, but it also, well, yeah, it'll allow a little bit more fridge to be opened. But let's see about the inside. Man, that's slick. I love that. That looks amazing. Yeah. This kind of impinges the fridge a little bit at its lowest point, but I think that's okay. Like, it's supposed to be a theft protected, so I'm probably good with that. So we'll kind of let's bump the fridge up against that. Let's check out the other side, the front, about here. And so, oh yeah, we have lots of spare room back here. Thinking that these guys can probably mount right there. Kind of in the jumble of all the plumbing. It's not perfect because the outlet is on this side of it. Looks somewhat bespoke. But I struggle with the fact that there's just not a whole lot of room for the plumbing. Right down in there, that is going to be the outlet. And so there will be a fitting sticking out. Although, you know, maybe if I were to get a 90-degree fitting, see if I can find one on Amazon, get a 90-degree. So it would be a male 1/2 NPT to 1/2 NPT male barb. If I could get a 90-degree, that's probably okay. And I like this being back here a lot more because if they were in front of the water tank, then you're really only getting about 3 feet of distance. And I think the rooftop tent will extend all the way back here. So obviously the further away the supports are, the more support there is. That's where we'll end this one. Let us know what you think of the pace here. I'm hoping for a balance between this being an overview of the major steps with a quick enough pace, but also giving insight into the decision making and learnings along the way. I've put a parts list in the video description in case you see anything here that you want to incorporate into your own build.